So, welcome everyone to this month's chapter President and President-elect sharing session. Something we'd like to discuss with all of you today is around strategic development with the chapter. A lot of the times in the fall, our chapters are meeting to start to plan the strategy for the next coming year. And as the leaders of the chapter, whether you're a president or that president-elect, you're really helping guide this discussion and this piece. So I wanted to take some time for us as a group to discuss how you, as a chapter, go about setting your chapter goals and strategies for that next year. So I'd like to open it up to you to just kind of get a feel for how you guys are going through that process. Are you meeting as a board to have strategy meeting? Greg, I see you came off mute.
I'll start. Why not?
Great.
Our planning session is actually tomorrow. I was just finishing the outline right now. Luckily, I have been lucky enough to have been a president before, so I've kind of gone through this process, but I probably do it a little bit different. And so basically what we're going to end up doing is breaking down every goal of the chapter, but as a board together, not me pushing my thoughts and my agenda down, but more of an open discussion with our board. So we have our chapter goals, and then we have 3 simple goals for every single committee. So we can keep them on task. We can stay on task as a board, but then it becomes our group's decision, our board's vision for the next year. And it's easy to keep everybody on track when everybody's on the same page from the start. So we'll take the results of this meeting, and then I'll do another strategic planning session with our committee chairs and pass that vision along to them. And so they have 3 easy goals that they know exactly what they have to do, whether it's our golf committee, our publications committee, LSC, whatever the case may be, but keep it simple. And then it's the easiest way to keep everybody on track. But I found it's best, and I got the best results by making sure it was all of our vision and not just mine shoving it down their throat, so to speak.
That's great. And I think you mentioned a great piece too about getting your committee chairs involved and making sure that they've got buy-in, especially if they've got that historical knowledge or if they've been in place for a while, to really have them as a part of that conversation too. I find that's really important. Carrie, I see you came off mute.
We have a multi-year strategic plan for our chapter, and I'm lucky enough that it comes up for review next year when I'm the president. So I was very interested to join because I'm feeling like I'm probably going to be overwhelmed doing it. But our plan is pretty much the same as what Greg said. You know, we have the goals for the board and then the committees as well. And it's very easily broken down into different categories and how each category goes to each committee. So it may be just, this is great, there's nothing that needs to be changed, or we might have a lot to rewrite. So
yeah, and I think with both of those pieces, it's important too how the goals from the committee are feeding into those overarching goals, right? So a lot of the times what I've seen with chapters when they are setting goals with committees is they're feeding into each other. Now, again, some of you who are with smaller chapters might be wondering, oh my gosh, are we doing something wrong because we're not working with our committees at that level or setting goals for them? Absolutely not. But make sure that within your committee structure, whatever they're doing or their function, they've got that buy-in, that they're providing feedback around the strategic goals, that they know what the strategic goals are for the chapter. So for example, if it's membership growth and you have a membership committee, they should understand that that is one of the overarching goals of the chapter. With that. But Carrie, you also mentioned something that I'd kind of like to get the pulse of everyone here today, that you have a multi-year strategic plan. I know specifically when we went into the pandemic, a lot of chapters kind of put a hold on that multi-year or long-term strategic planning because it was just such an unknown world at the time. So I'd like to get a pulse of, is your chapter doing almost just a yearly strategic plan, or are you looking at a multi-year strategic plan moving forward?
So I'm Amy. I'm from the Greater Los Angeles chapter, president-elect this year. So I know that past boards have tried to work on a multi-year strategic planning, but I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect, and maybe that's something that we're doing wrong. So if there's feedback on how to make that long-term or longer-term strategic plan work, I think the way that we've done it kind of is we take what we were working on last year and look at how we've done and if that's something that needs to continue. And I love Greg's feedback and Carrie's both, just about getting the buy-in from your board and making sure that you're all aligned for the mission and how it's tying back into the mission for CAI as a whole.
Noni, I had seen that you had come off mute too. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of doing our strategic plan. We actually sent a survey out. First, we sent it out to board members, then we sent it out to the committees, and then we went to business partners, and then we went out to everyone. And so we're compiling all that information. We actually have someone, a business partner, that's what she does. That's her job. So she's on our committee. Yay. So she's putting this all together for us. The board will be meeting in September for it's an all-day retreat, and we'll be talking about the strategic plan. And we want to make it at least 3 years, maybe 3 to 5. But then we need to have some, we would like to discuss with our committees, in keeping with the strategic plan, what do you see we need to be doing next year in your committee, and kind of working with them so everybody's kind of has a goal. Because I have found out that a lot of the committees want some type of direction from the board on what they should be focusing on instead of running a lot of directions.
Absolutely. And again, you bring up a couple good points. I also want to touch on something Amy said. There's not a bad way to do this or a standard. You've got to do what works best for you and your chapter. So if it is a multi-year, that's great. If it's shorter than that, usually you want to give yourself time to be successful. So again, you've got to just go down the track that works for you the best. But we do have people who are doing it both ways. So if you're interested in getting feedback with that, again, I think we've got that good group of people here if you're trying to make that change one way or another. But Noni brings up a really good point about surveys and kind of that research going into the meeting. So as you're going into these meetings, I think it's really important to find out, what is it that the members are wanting? Do we need to do a survey with our members or segment it to our member groups? Are we looking at certain data points? And maybe it would be good to see that, for example, if you're trying to increase a very specific membership category in business partners, I'm just going to use roofers as an example, and you're like, we need more roofers, but you already have the majority of your business partners are roofers. Is that really the best way to increase versus, hey, we only have one landscaper? Maybe we need to focus on that versus the one that we already have a large number in. So again, just making sure you've got some of those data points and pieces that you can actually track. So that's something that I also think is important, to make sure that if you're saying we want to track something, we want to increase something, do you actually have a way to track that data? So for example, I get a lot around your education programs. We want to, create a metric to measure success. And that can be anywhere from tracking registration to surveys and things like that. But if you don't survey after the fact for your education events, you don't even have a standard to go from to that increase. So while that might be a really great goal, if you don't have that starting point, it's going to be difficult to measure that metric. So just keep some of those things in mind going into those strategy sessions and during those. And again, your chapter staff will be able to help a lot with what metrics you're currently tracking versus being able to track in the future. Sharon, I see you came off mute. Did you want to say something or did you just come off mute?
Shannon or Sharon? Did I write
Oh,
Sharon?
no,
Because
no,
I may
no.
have done that.
I said Sharon. That was my fault. It is
I'll
Shannon.
answer
You
to
are
either.
correct.
I just want to make sure. Hey, I'm Shannon Lee. I'm the incoming president for the Southeast chapter. And I think that one of the things that we are going to really use in our toolbox, because it was so eye-opening for me at National Conference this year, was the form that y'all handed out about whose role is it. And if you don't have that, Kelly, it's a great thing, I think, to share with other board presidents, because when we came back, I realized that we're not spending our time in our lane. So from a strategic standpoint, we need to be asking the committee chairs to do their type of work strategically while we do our work strategically and the staff does their work, but that we kind of keep each other in each other's lane. So that's going to be a big part of our strategic plan for this year.
That's great. And I'll go ahead and I'll get that dropped in the chat for you all. The file, it's a worksheet that we did for those who weren't there. If you have questions about the worksheet, you can just let any of us know and we can go through it. One file will be the actual worksheet, and then the other file is the answers to that worksheet. I do just want to say these are kind of industry standards, so it might be slightly different based on how your chapter is set up, how many staff you have, you know, things like that. But this is kind of the nonprofit association world standard around the roles and responsibilities. So again, I love this. I love doing this with boards, with our committee chairs. So again, if you have any questions about how to utilize that, please feel free to let me know, or any of us from the chapter team here at headquarters. Another piece that was brought up too was kind of who's leading the effort of this meeting. From the people on today, and whether you're on video and you can raise your hand, or using the Zoom functionality, the React button. I know Zoom's kind of made a couple updates soon, so it's hard to see things and find where they are. On my screen, it's showing as a heart with a React, but how many of you, as the chapter leader of the president or president-elect, are running your strategic discussion? Okay, so I see a couple. How many have their staff running the discussion? Okay, I see a couple there. And then how many have an outside person, whether that's us from the headquarters team or an outsider running the discussion? Okay. So one thing for the people who are running the discussion as the chapter leaders here, and even with your chapter staff, one thing to be aware of is how you are able to participate in these discussions if you're the one leading and facilitating. So just be kind of mindful that your voice also should be heard. And sometimes that's hard if you're the facilitator. Same thing with the chapter staff. It's good for them to have a voice in the mix of everything and to participate at that level when they can. So just being mindful of that during the discussions. It's not right or wrong, but I know as the facilitator, sometimes it's difficult to share that voice. Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, so through the years, I've seen it kind of done different ways, and just a couple of things I noticed. If National came out, it was always great. They understood where we were going, and it turned out to be a great session. If we hired outside, like some sort of coach or consultant, I always found they always want to show you what they know rather than paying attention to what you need. So that was just one thing I ran into in the past. And then obviously we've ran it internally with, the president-elect or whatever. So there is a different advantage to each one of them. But I just kind of a little cautionary tale if you're going to an outside coach or an outside professional.
Yep. And sometimes there's costs associated with those professionals too. So I know sometimes that's a struggle of, do you want to financially spend money on that as well? With that note, our headquarters team, we do provide that assistance for chapters who are looking for it. I was just with Amy last week, actually. Hopefully she had a great experience. And we've got, into the fall, we've got lots of them coming up. So if you're looking for a facilitator, again, let us know. And it might not be your chapter liaison that you're always working with, just based on date or timing availability. But we're usually able to make our schedules work with the chapter. So if you are looking for someone to be that facilitator, please reach out to your liaison, myself, and we can, make sure that we can get out there and work with you with that. And we don't charge. We cover the travel for us to come out there. We ask that, if you're having a meal, you include us into that amount. But otherwise, there's not a fee or any expense put on you as the chapter to have us come out and do that. All right. In terms of strategic planning, do you guys look at what your mission and vision is and try to make sure that you're meeting your standard mission within your goals? I see some head nods, some I'm not sure. Just as a reminder, it's really good to make sure your goals are supporting that mission. Again, as a membership organization, we have a mission for a reason. And so just making sure that your goals or your strategy for the future can tie into our main priorities and our core mission of the organization and the chapter specifically is always good to bring it back to. We do have a question. Our chapter is doing a strategic plan and a business plan. So I'd love to get your feedback on that. We see a couple head nods. Sally, did you want to go into a deeper question with that?
Well, it's like I'm listening to this conversation about strategic plan, but if I go to the toolkit, I find I don't even find sample business plans, let alone a strategic plan. So I'm sitting here thinking, well, we have a business plan for the year, but there's no sort of grand strategy behind it. It's right, have the committees and do the things. So I was wondering if there's another level that I'm missing.
Greg, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, for us, after the strategic planning, we take these notes and then build them into our next year's business plan for our recertification and stuff to get sent in so they can kind of see the direction.
But is the strategic plan another document or is it just the meeting?
It's just the meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I wondered if it was just language, right? If it was just like, I don't want to have to develop another plan, but.
Yeah, no. So Sally, kind of what I've seen is a lot of them have that strategic planning meeting. They set their goals and then build that into that business plan.
Okay.
Some have a completely separate, strategic document. A lot of those are larger chapters that have a multifaceted piece to that. But overall, yes, that I would say are interchangeable.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can visualize if you had a big chapter with big reserves, you might invest in some research or some white paper development, those sorts of things. But for the smaller chapters where it's like swim really hard to keep your head above the water, then the plan is a little bit simpler than that, I presume.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we really see the gamut of goals as well, between growth, retention, putting out a new service or product to even back-end operations. So I think it's really important to get a pulse of where your chapter is at and what you need to focus on. And there's no wrong answer in any of these ways. There's not a, hey, we're asking you for 10% growth. That's not something that's an across the board piece. Again, it's what makes sense for your chapter to set forth and to highlight, because again, we do see the gamut. We see a lot of different things. You might have a change in staff this year, and you really want to have that focus on getting them up to speed, making sure they're building relationships versus a person who's been here for 15 years. You're not worried about that relationship or the operations that are in place. So again, don't get too concerned about what every other chapter is setting their goals at versus really taking a pulse of what makes sense for you. Go ahead, Sally.
I was going to say, if me again, my next question is, are there other chapters? So in our particular setting, we're in Ontario, Canada, And so we have fully licensed managers. So licensed managers are licensed. Directors have mandatory education. So to get people to attend or to get to people to pay for a membership at CAI is next to impossible. Other than business partners, right? So I was wondering if there's other chapters that tackle how do you still make a CAI chapter successful when individual managers and director or what do you call them, homeowner leaders are unlikely to buy a membership. But so you have to structure it around that reality in a sense.
Carrie, I know Illinois is licensed, but I don't think you guys are running into that issue with them joining.
No,
What kind of fee do they pay for licensing there? Like our guys are paying $1,000 a year. Yeah, that was what I expected.
No, thanks. Yeah, we're kind of the opposite where our homeowner leaders aren't as high as our managers, but the manager's licensing is like $300, but I think it's every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And they
But-
need an education component and standard. And so a lot of the
Yep.
times we're seeing them come into CAI to meet those education requirements and make sure they're at that higher level than others who are just paying a fee.
But is there not a heap of, like in Ontario, there is a heap of free education. Every legal firm puts on sessions for free. The other associations put on sessions for free. So the managers can get their continuing ed for free.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do we have anyone from Florida? I see a couple people from Florida. They might have some good, because I know you guys have a ton of that same situation that you're running into. I don't know if you'd like to speak to that at all, of what you're doing to kind of combat the free education compared to CAI, or even to get those people to convert over to members.
Hey, we're up in the North Gulf Coast and in the Panhandle of Florida, but yes, getting that good mix is difficult, whether it's free education or not. Then we've got that in Florida, we have this group called the CAMU, if anybody's familiar with that. That goes around and puts on this very, very nice show. I've actually been to it. You get free education, free food, and it's not cold plate food. It's filet mignon and salmon and all kind of other fancy stuff. So we're competing with that here in our chapter specifically because they just moved in. But it's tough to get those memberships to buy in here anyway.
Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm with Suncoast chapter here on the west coast of Florida. And we have found that they're not going to go away. A lot of them are our colleagues that are putting on these different events. So the motto has kind of been, if you can't beat them, join them. So we've basically pushed the designations, because those are the one thing that those folks can't do. They're not, they don't have the authority to do that. So we go to these events along with them, and then they give us that time to kind of discuss the designations, the association manager designations, which also follows with business partners, CERMs, and things like that. So we've been able to collaborate with them, and it's helped a lot to provide the information that CAI does so much more than basically just what they're doing with these classes.
Great, thank you for that. And Sally, if you want to talk deeper, Emily Jennings, who's on our team, she's actually with a group of our Florida chapters doing a special workshop today. So she wasn't able to join us, but I think she would be great to talk to as well. She was a former chapter executive director. She now works with us at the headquarters staff. So she would be great to kind of pick her brain a little bit with that too.
Sure.
All right, so at this time, I would like to open it up for questions or anything that any of you would like to discuss with the group. So feel free to come off mute at any time and throw out what you'd like to talk about. Yeah, go for it,
I was
Sally.
gonna say, I always have questions. I have questions because I'm new to this, right? So it's like everything I try is hard. So in Canada, we have the one chapter, and so we have the one advocacy committee as well. So we don't have you guys have, I think, the state advocacy committees, right? So, and one of the challenges on the advocacy committee is you get some lawyers signed up, you get some folks signed up, you meet, but none of them ever come with ideas about what we should tackle, right? So I chair that, and if I don't show up with an idea, nobody else does. And I was wondering, like, what do other chapters do to get folks to like have their ears to the ground to hear about the issues so that they get raised up to the legislative committees? If there's any thoughts on that, it would help. Because otherwise I go to meetings and everybody just looks at me like I'm gonna magically produce something for them to do. And I'm tired of it.
Do you-
Joanna, go ahead.
Yeah, so do you set the expectation that they should come with meetings? I'm sorry, come with ideas? Maybe it's like an email a day or two before, maybe an agenda,
Yeah,
reminder. Because everyone gets super busy, so sometimes what's on top of mind for you might not be for the other people, even though they're obviously expected to join the meeting. But sometimes just a little nudge helps. I'm not sure if that's something you're already implementing.
yeah, I mean, I tend to send them an email a few days before with the agenda and a little, don't forget to like think about what's on your desk, what are the big issues facing condos these days? And
Yeah, I mean, I think that another way you can skin the cat is maybe suggest some topics. That way at least like the main buckets are set up, and then, ask them to, this month we're focused on, whatever programs or whatever it is that the topics are that you want to focus on. Please be prepared to, discuss an idea or two so we can put together, something that intelligently makes sense. And that way, maybe that inspires, some
you
thought.
might get them thinking, yeah.
Yeah. And also sometimes just thinking about it can get overwhelming. I've actually found that the CAI intranet is such a wealth of information to kind of also help you analyze what are the main issues out there and also find information. So like for me, and I'm with the Long Island chapter that's in New York. So when we're looking, for example, at programs for next year, in addition to surveying our communities, I also look at the internet to see, hey, like what's trending. So I see that like emotional support animals are trending. So I throw that out for an idea. I see that rogue board members, they're always trending. So we throw that out as an idea. Sometimes just motivating the team to inspire ideas is kind of what needs to happen. And plus, on top of that, it's always easier to narrow it down from something than from nothing. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And by the
Perfect.
way, CI team, I freaking love that intranet. For
Oh,
I'm the marketing resource for pretty much for our chapter. So as a marketer, like if I need any information, I just go in there, you can search, you could chime in on conversations. If any of the people on this call haven't explored that yet, please do so, because I think you will find a lot of value for finding solutions, finding problems, and also topics that are trending that you might not have thought are an issue for your communities that you might want to bring up in a program.
Joanna,
So-
that's the exchange you're talking about? Like I go to the chapter toolkit, but I'm wondering if I'm missing something else then.
I don't know specifically what it's called. Maybe CA National, you guys could chime in, but it's like
Yeah.
where all the communities meet to discuss issues, and then you could chime in and provide solutions
yeah,
and also
okay.
learn.
Yeah, that's the exchange that we've got
Exchange.
set up. So that's the main community is what she's talking about. So that's the full member gamut. And then we also have, again, the toolkit for you as the chapter leaders that are built in that. And then you also have a very specific portal within that exchange for the presidents and president-elects. So you can, again, communicate amongst yourselves in that same sort of way. But yes, and then we do try to send out some trends. So I think in either this week or next week's weekly email, we plan to send out some trend topics that we've seen on Exchange recently. So we try to do that as well, just to feed that into you of if you're doing a hot topics education or anything like that, you can see and then go back to Exchange and see what's trending too. Nomi, you came off mute again.
I don't know if this, I don't really understand how, your government's set up in Canada, but we have the state, so we have legislative action committee for the state, but then we also have different counties that like to do their own thing. And so we have certain people who volunteered to monitor what's happening in those counties. So they have a relationship with someone in the county, which is helpful. And then they bring it back to the entire committee to talk about. And then we also have people who are watching the bills that are coming up, because even if it's not specific, it can definitely affect community associations. You know, the Corporate Transparency Act, there's so many things that maybe not be just for community associations, but realtors in the United States love to come up with laws that affect community associations. So it's always good to be like aware of those so that CAI can take a stand on it.
Thank you for that. And Alicia had posted our advocacy page in there. Sally, I'm not sure, I haven't looked at it in a while in terms of Canada and tracking. But I'm sure, again, within the US space, we're tracking a lot of legislation constantly. And you can see that how it relates to your state. So we've got a very intense network with that. Sally, take a look at that. If you think there's something that would be more beneficial with Canada specifically, again, I think our government and public affairs team can work through that with your committee and see, I'm sure they're tracking, I'm sure they're watching things. I know they do that on a global scale. But if there needs to be something more specific that would benefit you in the chapter, I'm sure they would love to have that conversation. All right, so how's August going? How's the first day going for everybody? Good. Go ahead, Joanna.
It's my birthday, so it's off to a fantastic start.
There you go. Well, happy birthday. Well, thank you for joining us on your birthday. I really appreciate that. All right, any other concerns you guys have going into this month that you want to bring to the group? One reminder I do have for all of you is that in relation to the LAP committee nominations, those are due to us in September, and they do need to be approved by the board. So if you have not officially approved them at one of your board meetings, we do need that approval. So that should be on your August board meeting. If you don't have an August board meeting and you don't have that approved yet, you will need to do a special meeting to get those approved. It's only for the people who are expired. You should have been receiving communication. Your executive director should have been receiving communication. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, please let me know after the meeting and I'll make sure I connect you with Lula, who manages that process on our team. But even if the person already sat in the role and they're just going to continue the next term, they still need that board approval for that person. So just, again, make sure that's on your docket for this month so that when September comes, you've already got that taken care of and you don't need to worry about that piece. And then finally, I'd also like to introduce Lawrence, who's on the call today. He is a new member of our team here with Chapter Relations. So you will start to see his name on things. You will start to see communications from him. He is based in Washington, D.C. At our headquarters office. And so he is kind of, for us who work remotely outside of the DC area, he's kind of our boots on the ground there at the office for us. So if we're ever sending packages to you all or anything, it's going to be Lawrence who's sending them over to you. So I just wanted to introduce him to you so you can start seeing his face, his name on things moving forward. You're not surprised. So welcome, Lawrence. We're happy to have you as a part of the team. If no one else has anything, we can go ahead and we can end the call, but I'll do one final shout out to see if anyone would like to say any thing or throw anything else out to the group. I see Joanna and then Sally.
So our chapter is actually having a really big challenge. So we're a fairly large chapter and we execute an annual trade show. And the trade show grew so large that now we're trying to implement a lead retrieval at our trade show. That way there's value for the vendors as well as for the community board members. And then it makes it easier for follow-ups. but the ones that I've researched, they're so freaking expensive. Like, are you guys utilizing any lead retrievals that are, you know, obviously you can't get one for free, like anything that's reasonable or any workarounds that you've seen work? We did
You
try
just-
one of those
Just charge the exhibitors, like at most trade shows, if we're exhibiting, we pay for lead retrieval if we want it. So if it's whatever cost it is, you just flow it through to the exhibitors.
So do you think that a cost of $200, no, $300 would be acceptable? Because that's what
Totally.
they have to
Yeah.
charge. Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Carrie,
interesting.
Carrie, go ahead. I know you came off mute.
Yeah, no, we do the same. We use, I don't even know where they are from, but they come out every year and we charge it back to the exhibitors and they can choose to do it via their phone or a scanner and they get all that information directly and the exhibitors pay for it.
Do you mind sharing, if it's okay with me, what that charge is, just so I can have a baseline compared to what I've researched?
You know what, Karen, why don't I do this? Because I think Cheryl does that. So Joanna,
Yep.
Alicia, if you wouldn't mind dropping Cheryl's email address in the chat. Cheryl, they're from the Illinois chapter, and so Cheryl's their executive director. So if you want to reach out to her, I'm sure she can send you all of the logistics and price point and everything like that to see if
Great,
it's
that will
aligned.
be fantastic. Thank you, ladies, so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just had a quick question, and that was, so we run a conference each year, and I have this rule that says that you can't have more than one speaker from any firm. And I'm getting a little bit of pushback on that, and I wondered, is that like traditionally at conferences, would a conference organizing committee allow one firm to have multiple speakers at the conference, or is it normal to limit it to one?
Pretty normal for most of the chapters throughout Southern California. Usually there's a annual rule that only one person from a particular vendor company per year. Sometimes they do get exceptions for the large scale conferences. So you might speak in the luncheon in March, but you're okay to speak at the expo in August. But that's usually the only exception.
Interesting. So not being unreasonable.
I can say from our perspective, we had a conference last February and ended up with like 8 managers from one management company speaking in like 10 different subjects. So it was like their day for being exhibited. It was crazy. I'm not necessarily for that, but we only can pick from the people that apply to be speakers too. So you're kind of weighing it there too if you don't have people volunteering.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice there is you've got to look at who's submitting for those proposals. But I do know that I agree with Greg at the majority of our chapters. I have seen kind of that year round, if you've spoken at one, you're not, unless it's a topic that you know that that person is the full on expert end all be all person. And then that's usually when that exception is made. And most people understand why they're making the exception to that rule. But I do think that goes back to policies of the chapter, that if you do have a rule like that in place, that you have something like that to follow. So if someone does question it, you can point back to kind of this is our policy in regards to education or in regards to speakers. So again, that's just a good rule of thumb. Make sure you're checking your policies too to see if you've got something in place around that.